Well, Secret Strategies to Dealing with 8 Archetypal Managers is a new book compiled by Vivienne Lawack, Hanlie Lizette Wessels and Robert Craig. The 3 authors have compiled a list of guidelines to help employees to better understand why their difficult manager is the way they are and how best to deal with them. To help us unpack this offering, we're now joined in studio by one of its joint authors, Hanlie Lizette Wessels. A very good morning to you, Hanlie. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Simpiwe. Thank you for having me.
Well, we've all worked with a very impossible boss at some point in our lives. So what really inspired you to write this book?
So Vivienne and I met 20 years ago when we were young moms, and we worked together at the Reserve Bank. Okay. And between supporting each other with kids and so on, we also supported each other with helping to work out how to deal with difficult bosses.
Right.
And as it goes, you watch a lot of animation movies, and we started to recognize characters like Lord Farquaad from Shrek, or some of the characters that really are quite difficult. And as we started supporting each other, Vivienne started writing about some of the difficult people that she had, anecdotally, and she said to me, "Why don't you write with?" So 20 years later, we wrote it up into a formal book, and in lockdown, Vivienne said, "We now need to finish this." As we then gave it to some people to read, our one friend said, "But what do I now do? I recognize this character. What do I do?" And of course, we were fortunate to get a lot of support over the years, and we started writing up the strategies. And then the one friend also said, "But what if it's me?" So we added a chapter, "If you recognize yourself." So it's really to be a coach in your pocket and support you when you have a terrible day. You go home tonight, you don't know what to do, your husband is tired, your wife is tired of listening at this, and find a strategy and be productive, lift your energy the next day.
Right, right. So what really sparked the idea of sharing your experiences? I mean, is it really sharing your experience with your past bosses?
It is sharing our experience, but what we found over the years is, because this book took quite a while, we were middle managers, we started progressing in corporates, we kept on recognizing the same patterns over and over again, and we realized that these difficult managers and difficult bosses reduce your value, and it makes you difficult to succeed, and sometimes you leave way too early and you resign, because people leave leaders, they don't leave companies. So it is a strategy to help you equalize the relationship and be more successful at your career. So it was really sharing a coach in your pocket.
Let's talk about these 8 archetypal bosses that you are featuring in this book.
Yes. So we've got 4 of them that's really in your face.
Yeah.
That's really, I think, one of the most easiest ones to recognize is Mr. Samey, which is incredibly controlling. He likes to invoke conflict. He would really make it difficult for people in front of their peers. That's one. You've got Mr. Illusion, who is...
Mr. Illusion?
Illusion. Okay. Very difficult to recognize. He weaponized communication. So he would typically, if someone is not in the room today, would say, "Oh, doesn't matter that they're not here, they don't add much value." But that does a lot of harm to that person. So normally you recognize them only a bit later. Then there's Mr. Makeup. And Mr. Makeup is not who he really is. He's giving you someone different than what he is, so he portrays himself as someone else, loves to be adored, and that is what his behavior is then around, but he makes you work for his objectives, not for yours.
Yes.
And then there's Mr. Tumbleweed, which is very indecisive. So because of that, a lot of the other characters become opportunistic and manipulate him for decisions. So if he's indecisive, his team doesn't move forward, and it's quite hard. You can't get conflict resolved. Another one is Mr. Wenwe. And all the solutions come from the past. So if you come up with a new idea, even if you're implementing a new project, it is quite difficult because this person is in love with what was, not what is. And that's quite a risk in a corporate. When you're implementing change and implementing big projects, they will make you fail if they can, because they want to keep it as it was. So those are some of the characters. Yeah, I think they all bring different risks, and they do what we call, they put glass cages, not even a glass ceiling, around their staff members, and they limit their value more and more. And you know, managers get trained on how to be good managers, but we don't train staff how to manage their managers, to make sure that they equalize and start to resolve the conflict.
Yeah.
So it is about creating the belief that you're not helpless in this. You can actually change the relationship, and at that critical interventions, make it better.
And Hanlie, speaking of managing the managers by staff, are you comfortable sharing with us your first-hand experience dealing with a very impossible boss, maybe in the past?
Yes, would you like me to give an example?
Well,
Yeah.
if you're comfortable.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. So I was working quite hard. I was at executive level, and I fell ill during this time, and I was off for 3 days. So the Monday morning when I was driving in, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I know I've got a difficult boss here. Let me brace myself for the EXCO meeting. And the meeting started, and even before the agenda went up, the boss sat back and he said, so Hanlie, you've been off for 3 days. I said to him, yes, you know, I have.
Yeah.
I've been ill. He says, but 3 days, I've never been off for 30 years in my career.
What?
So this particular boss is competitively insecure. That is, so we write about why, and that is very, very helpful, if I understood that before. So he was competing actually with me to show, oh, I'm so healthy. You're not that healthy as me. And I replied, but, you know, I was really ill, you know, this was wrong and so on. But what I should have done, and this is one of the strategies that we share, is when he asked the first time, it's fine. I said, yes, I'm off ill. But when he asked the second time and said, but, you know, I've never been off ill, but for 3 days, I should have said to him, why are we discussing my sick leave in front of my peers?
Right.
So using questions to counter him then puts his brain in reverse, and he then has to answer. And I should have asked, why aren't we getting on with the agenda? Please, let's start.
True.
So it's that moment of empowerment that often makes staff feel helpless. And Rob Craig, who helped us writing up the strategy, he taught me this technique, and that is why we asked him to write with, even though Vivienne and I has been writing on the book. And that empower you. And that's what it's about. It's just to equalize. And then his behavior changed after that. So that's an example of it.
But Hanlie, do you not think, though, that in some instances,
Yeah.
the bosses or the leaders may feel threatened by, you know, by your superiority, or maybe your academic superiority, or your financial standing or financial status, to a
Yes.
point where they start, you know, victimizing you? Is that not a factor, though?
You know what? Sammy, for example, his behavior is founded in, he's competitive, but he's insecure. So he's competitively insecure.
True.
But in our experience, I mean, you wouldn't challenge him every day on everything. Sometimes you just bite your tongue, and that is one of the strategies as well. But for the interventions that matter, it is good to be ready with a strategy. So you can't do it in every conversation. Sometimes you just got to let it go. But you can't change your manager. I mean, he's been trained, he's senior, but you don't have to be devalued in the situation, and you don't have to get smaller and smaller. You can still show your value. So I don't think you can do it all the time, but when you plan those critical interventions, you can plan with a strategy. And he would like it because he can speak more. He thinks he's coming up with the solutions.
So what are some of the most common symptoms or, you know, qualities of what could be regarded as an impossible boss?
It's really people that limit the value of their teams. So,
Right.
so they're either so disorganized that their team are always set up for failure, but it's their impact on team. I think that is the biggest, and they manifest very differently if you look at the characters in our book. And our friends keep on recognizing the same. So they're everywhere. We at a stage said there's a Bernie in every workplace.
Yes.
So they're everywhere because we're humans. But at the end, as humans, we need to get results together despite our differences.
Right.
Yeah.
Hanlie, great chatting to you.
Thank you
Very
so much
beautiful
for having me.
conversation. And this is such a brilliant book. I mean, we all need these 8 strategies to deal with very impossible bosses in the workplace. Great
Thank you
chatting
so
to you.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's corporate executive Hanlie Lizette Wessels, and we're just in conversation with her about the book she co-authored with Vivienne Lawack and Robert Craig, titled Impossible Bosses.